Utah is officially Big 12 bound, and we're talking about all the ramifications of the Utes' move to the Big 12 on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time joining our show, like and subscribe. Can't thank you guys enough for your support this past week. I know it was because of the craziness of the news, but this was the best week in our channel's history, and I appreciate all of you who have subscribed because we did see a huge growth in subscribers as well. So can't thank you guys enough. Your support on this channel means the world to me. My name is JT Wistcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department, and today, we're finally talking about at the end of conference realignment as it relates to Utah because they've officially made their move and it's leaving the Pac-12 and going to the Big 12. There is so much to dive into in this. I mean, the buildup for it has been unbelievable. Unpacking everything is gonna take some time, and that's what we're gonna do today. So, the first thing I think to say is this. This was the only move, in my opinion, that Utah could make as soon as Oregon and Washington left. I said on yesterday's show, I still felt like even if Arizona State had decided to leave, I still thought there was a path for Utah in the pack in the short term, as long as Oregon and Washington were still there. Because you look at it, if you like just contenders, right? Oregon, Washington, Utah are all viewed as contenders and top 15 teams and top 15 programs right now, I would say, in college football. Arizona State, Colorado, they weren't that. Trending in that direction one day, maybe eventually, but they weren't right now. So the next few seasons, I still thought like you could still, that playoff access, all of that, I still thought it made a lot of sense for Utah. But that perception of the pack being still having a shot at the playoff, being viewed as a contender, that left when you took Oregon and Washington away. If Utah had stayed, they would have been only viewed as the contender. And like we said again, that if Utah did stay, like maybe the Pac-12 packages together other schools, didn't seem like that would be likely anyways. But then what does Utah have to basically go undefeated every season because the opponents they would be playing wouldn't probably be considered strong enough year in and year out. I hope that an Oregon State would be considered up to that standard, but the reality of it, they probably wouldn't be. So when Oregon and Washington left, that's when the Pac-12 really started to crumble. We already knew that Arizona and Arizona State were probably going to go. Utah had to make this move, and it's a good move for Utah. It's one that eventually I'm going to be really excited about. There are parts of me that are excited about it, and part of me is still a little bummed out. I just feel for the Pac-12 schools. Oregon State, Washington State, they're going to lose a lot of money from this deal not going through, right? From losing out on the media rights money and all of that. And those are smaller brands that did their best to try to elevate themselves. And once again, smaller brands, I felt like that were heading in the right direction. So I feel bad for them. And this has never been about my disdain or anything like that for the Big 12. My reasoning for wanting to stay in the Pac-12, it was all about how much I enjoyed the Pac-12. I enjoyed the Pac-12 as it is. I enjoyed the Big 12 as it is. And I welcome the additions the Big 12 made. I think Houston, BYU, every program, Cincinnati, all the additions the Big 12 made. I think it's been fantastic for them. I thought it made a lot of sense. And it's just something I enjoyed having 5 Power 5 conferences. So that was where I wanted this to continue to kind of trend and go. And I liked college football the way it was. I wanted it to stay that way. So that's all it was. It's not anything against the Big 12. I think there's a ton of great programs in the Big 12. I think Utah's going to be in for some great games. It's going to be great once we get to that phase of this. But part of me is very sad for the people that will potentially lose jobs of this fallout, Pac-12 schools, and probably at the Pac-12 institution itself. Because I don't think the Pac-12 is going to survive this, as tough as that is to say. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're able to pull all these schools together and survive and make something, but they obviously won't be viewed as a Power 5 conference anymore. I know Paul Feinbaum a few weeks ago said, I don't view the Pac-12 as even a Power 5 or whatever he said, as long as Oregon, Washington, Utah, and then even to that extent, like schools like in Arizona and Colorado with the ceiling to be really good. I just thought that was, or Colorado had left after he made the comment, but like losing Colorado to me didn't justify making that comment when you still had all these schools in there that were considered contenders and were considered, most of them, better than most of the schools in the Big 12 at least it relates to this football season, especially in and year out. Oregon, Washington, Utah at that time were all capable of being better than any Big 12 school. So that's why I thought that comment was crazy then. But now it's just, we're at the point where, like I said, Utah had to make this move. It's a smart move by President Randall, by Mark Harlan. And it's crazy. I mean, I'm recording this now past midnight, but as most of you probably know, when this news all broke on Friday, August 4th, it was 2 weeks ago to the day, Pac-12 Media Day was, when Mark Holland was on stage with Commissioner Kolakov talking about how strong the conference is and, everything's going to stay together. Longer we wait, the deal gets better, right? And that's not the case. And now we're in a new world, and Utah is in the Big 12. It still feels weird. I got to look. I'm looking at it right now. I just pulled it up on Twitter so I can view it. Utah with that dash next to the Big 12 logo. It's just, it takes getting used to. It's crazy. And like I said, there's a lot of excitement with it. It's going to lead to a lot of great games and everything, but I am still slightly bummed out just for what it means in the ramifications for all the Pac-12 members who got left behind, and just once again the people in the conference office and all over the sport now who will very likely could lose their job because of the fallout from the TV deal overall. So let's unpack what was a crazy day, right? I know for those of you who listened to my episode that I recorded on Thursday that dropped on Friday, I stayed up late Thursday night trying to read the tea leaves, see what was going to happen, and it seemed like we were trending toward Arizona joining the Big 12 at that point, because what we had heard was the Big 12 board, the presidents, my bad, had all voted to allow Arizona in. And then what was going to happen was we just assumed like, oh, Arizona's going to accept it. But then I don't know about you guys, but then I woke up that morning and all of a sudden my phone was when I was refreshing my timeline, all I saw was things changed overnight. The Pac-12 is back together. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. They might actually pull this off. But that was where I made a little bit of a mistake, right? Believing that anyone who's kind of believed in the Pac-12 at this point would figure itself out and then all the issues out has been mistaken, including myself. Like I said, I thought Utah would stay in the Pac-12. I thought the Pac-12 would stay together. I was wrong, and I have no problem admitting that because I absolutely was. And then the tide turned again, and then we learned that Oregon had departed, and we knew Washington was going to do whatever Oregon did, so that Washington departed. And then I think Utah and Arizona State looked at each other and both had to sprinted to catch up to Arizona to then get an opportunity to go into the Big 12, which the members approved. And I think one thing that's worth noting that's great for Utah is that they do get the full, if it's 31 or 32, I feel like I've seen different things at this point. Either way, they get the full deal. I mean, 16 schools will eventually get up to that number. It's a really good deal for the Big 12 that Commissioner Yormarker's put together. The new commissioner, or not the new commissioner, but Utah's new commissioner of the conference they resided, which once again, it feels weird to say it out loud. So it was just a crazy timeline. I was actually golfing this morning, just golfing when everything was trickling out, constantly refreshing my phone after every hole, as I'm sure all of you were who are at work, right? Constantly refreshing your phone, seeing what the latest news would be. And it was just crazy how quickly all the insiders went from the Pac-12 has somehow saved itself to instantly, like in not even an hour gone, oh no, the Pac-12 is dead again. Like it's worse than it's ever been. And that's what it became. And it was a crazy day. I think crazier than anyone could have predicted, because I think we all thought it would just be kind of one foul swoop. Like either that last minute would come in, they would get saved and they'd stay in the Pac-12, or 1 minute, last minute, or not last minute, but they would just continue and they would end up in the Big 12. And then the tide turned, and it turned right back really quickly. And now the Big 12 is up to 16. Pac-12 is down to 4 and very well could not exist, or more than likely will not exist a year from now, which once again, that part of it, it bums me out. But I want to continue to talk about what this means for Utah, all the things that excite me about joining the Big 12, because there are a lot of positives here, and just more of the ramifications of all of this, because there's a lot of them when the buildup for this has been going for so many months. And this is a day, August 4th, when once again, I'm recording it past August 4th because it's past minute, but you guys know what I mean. This is a day that will long go down in college football. I'm not sure. In fact, if I had to guess, I'm probably going to say it's not going to be for the best, just because, like I said, just the effect it had on Oregon State, Washington State, potentially on Cal. We'll see what ends up. Stanford feels like to me they'll just go independent and be fine, honestly. But the effect it had on college athletics, and just once again, like just the TV money has now ravaged a conference, is a crazy sentence, and it's one that's absolutely true. But once again, we're going to continue to talk about Utah to the Big 12 and the fallout of all of that in 1 second. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Alrighty, coming back in to talk about what happens next for Utah and everything. And once again, just going forward in the future, this was the only move Utah could make, and it was the right move for them to earn the most money and be in the most stable conference going forward. Once again, I'm still skeptical of it. It was not the best move for them in terms of access to the playoff, but also I'll say this, it probably was in terms of it wasn't the best move for them in terms of what the rules were set at, but the rules have obviously just changed because the Pac-12 is not going to get an automatic qualifier anymore, obviously. So this is now was again probably Utah's best move at a shot at a playoff spot. Now it's just going to be hard. I mean, you have to be the best of 16 teams. That's not easy to do year in and year out. And before we dive into what I'm excited about, I love some of your guys' optimism that Utah's going to come into the Big 12 and they're going to dominate right away and they're just going to be the premier team in the conference and football wise. And I hope they are. Maybe they will be. That's really hard to do. It's really hard to be a dynasty. And Utah's been able to be a dynasty because they've been able to keep this core intact this last 2 years, right? And yeah, they had the good year with Tyler Huntley, but we don't count the COVID year, right? Let's say that's a normal college football season. And I know I'm not trying to bet against Coach Witt recently because he's been fantastic, but I just look at that Utah roster, the struggles of a Jake Bentley and everything. Defensively, Utah was okay that season, if I remember correctly, but I think Washington State still dropped 30 on them, and then Utah had the big comeback in the second half. Either way, during the COVID season, I think that would have been a down year for Utah. I don't think it's crazy to say had it been a full college football season, Utah probably would have not made the just the Pac-12 championship in 2020. I just think when you lose a player like Tyler Huntley, and it was a bummer what happened with Cam Rising and him getting hurt and everything. And who knows, maybe just if circumstances are different, maybe he stays healthy, maybe he starts it off right away. But once again, still it was a very different core and everything. It's just hard to dominate year in and year out. And it's hard to do it with a new core. Utah has a chance to win the Pac-12, in my opinion, this year because they return this core that has been so strong. Let's look at ahead to next year, what Utah is going to be losing. And once again, I really like the depth that Utah has. I like the players that are coming back for Utah, but it's just really hard. And we've seen in the past, right? Utah's bringing in better recruits. We've seen Utah be able to beat the programs that brought in the better recruits in the past because they recruited the right type of players. They've done a good job of that. And just everything's clicked for Utah. Who's to say some of those other schools couldn't apply the same mindset where they find the right players for their system and it clicks for them? It absolutely could work out that way. But once again, let's just look ahead to Utah in the Big 12 in 2024. And once again, Utah could win the Big 12 next season. I truly believe they could just because I have that much faith in Coach Whittingham, the staff, and a couple of the returners. After this season, Utah will lose their quarterback, their top 2 tight ends, arguably their top 1 to 2 receivers because I think Pittman's eligibility is done. And we'll see where it seems like he's trending towards being the second leading receiver on this team behind a Devon Bailey. Devon Bailey will also be gone. Probably lose 2 to 3 offensive linemen. Laumea and Bills seem gone to me after this year. I think they might have some eligibility with the COVID, everything, the eligibility all got screwed up. So Mekhi Bernard will also be gone. We'll see if Jaquindon Jackson is. I'm on the record. I think Jaquindon could have just an unbelievable year, and I absolutely think he could raise his stock enough to where he's like, I'm going to go to the NFL. We know Chris Curry's going to be gone. So you lost 3 running backs there. That's a lot of starters I just went through. Defensive-wise, on the D-line, I probably would guess a Junior Tafuna would go. I think Van, at this point, he's been at Utah for the past couple of years now. I could see him going as well. Maybe those guys stay. So you D-line, you'll lose some guys. Linebacker-wise, Karene Reed might go. Leavani Damuni definitely goes. JT Broughton, Zamaya Vaughn, I expect to go. Cole Bishop's the only, well, Vaki won't, but Cole Bishop might. So a lot of the defense will remain intact, I guess, but especially offensively. I mean, you were losing potentially like all of your skill position production. Like there's a chance Utah could lose that. And it's a different world in college football. And depending on if Cam Rising's healthy or not, you're going to be starting a quarterback who's never started in college before a game, depending on when Brandon Rose is needed to play in action. And we'll see what happens with Nate Johnson and all of that too. But once again, that is not easy to do while you're in your first year in a new conference too. Utah could do it. Kyle Whittingham's that good of a coach. I like the returning players. Lander Barton. There'll still be a couple guys back along this offensive line. And who knows, maybe some underclassmen like a Mikey Matthews steps up and somehow becomes the third receiver on this team. Maybe a Landon King continues to flash, and we're excited about him. So like I said, Utah could win the Big 12 next season, but I just don't think it's wise to say Utah's going to go in and dominate right away when they're losing so much of the core that has made them such a special Pac-12 team, such a special college football team in general. It's just really hard to keep that production up in college football. There's a reason it took Utah so long to break through, not just because they were building up, but it's just really hard over the course of a college football season. Don't forget, I'm so happy Utah made the Pac-12 championship, won the Pac-12 championship last year. They did not control their own destiny. They had to get help from 3 different schools, and Oregon State Man, a final act for the Beavers basically, and the Pac-12 as we know it, because now it's going to change after the season. But either way, like just what they did against Oregon to get Utah in the Pac-12 championship game, coming back down from whatever it was 27-0 to win like 34-27. I don't even remember. But either way, like Utah doesn't get in if that crazy improbable comeback doesn't happen. So I just want to remind fans to keep that in mind and be a little bit more like, just be like, okay, we know a lot of things could happen here. Like it's a very fluid situation. So, well, I'm excited about Utah's potential in 2024. I'm not guaranteeing they will be in the championship game or win it right away because once again, they're losing a lot of talent. I do want to wrap up with just two things. First, one, I'm excited about joining the Big 12. I've been on record for this a while. Number one thing by far, playing BYU, getting the rivalry game, get it on rivalry weekend as well, build it up. It should be the best rivalry in the Big 12. It's going to be awesome. I think this is great for both the schools to have the rivalry back, to be playing each year in general. I'm really excited about it. I think the rivalry game is great. I know it brings out some passion that goes over the edge to kind of rage sometimes amongst fans and just people on Twitter. But overall, rivalries are one of the things that make college sports great. I am glad we get the BYU rivalry back. Also, just excited to play some of these other big brands year in and year out. I mean, teams like Baylor, Cincinnati, which I guess they're down Luke Fickell a little bit, but still eventually on the rise. Iowa State, Matt Campbell, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, Kansas, even football is on the rise. Like they're in basketball, men's basketball take the running Utes. It's going to be really hard for the running Utes early on. Women's basketball, they'll hit the ground running, be fine. And we'll talk about how some of the other Utah sports will do in the future in general. But overall, yeah, like I said, I'm really excited to be playing these new opponents. They excite me. These are really good storied, powerful traditional programs, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see how Utah does in the Big 12. Last thing I do want to end with this on is just saying I just feel really bad for the Pac-12. I just think this is what sucks about the state of the sport right now is so many people are going to be impacted. Student athletes want to have the chance to compete on the same stage as they did because of this TV money. The world revolves around football for better or worse. Heck, you guys prove it, right? I mean, my least viewed episodes are when I talk about other sports. You guys drive the content. Football is by far what you guys care about the most in terms of the views department overall. So it's the nature of the sport. It is what it is. I understand football is the most entertaining. I obviously find it most entertaining too. I talk about it for 16 minutes every weekday for the entire year, basically, as part of the host of this podcast. But like I said, I do feel for the student athletes. I feel for the presidents, not only the presidents as much. They'll be okay. But all the individual, like just the athletes and some of the smaller level, just members of like the Pac-12 and these schools who could be affected by the financial ramifications of it. That's the part that bums me out and hurts. And that's the part about me that I'm sad to leave the Pac-12, because we've also had a lot of great memories and great times in the Pac-12. Win the Pac-12 championships, just in general, lots of fun classic games and matchups. And I'm going to miss playing USC. I just felt like the rivalry that's turned into these the last year and what it's going to be this year was fun. So I'm going to miss those teams, but I'm excited about the Big 12 teams overall. So once again, just my heart goes out to all the Pac-12 people who will be affected by this, just from the smaller schools and the conference office level as well, and the media members who could potentially be impacted at the Pac-12 level too after this season. But overall, this was the best move for Utah. It was the only move after Oregon left. I'm glad they were able to capitalize on it. Also, once again, we've been saying for a while that Utah would not be headed back to the Mountain West Conference. I am so glad that those comments can finally stop. You guys have been killing me with those for a while now, so please don't send me any more Utah to the Mountain West Conference, because it ain't happening. As I said, I know I was wrong thinking Utah would stay at the Pac-12, but I at least knew they'd stay at the Power 5 level, so got to give me some credit there. But overall, good move for Utah, the right move. Good job by President Randall and Mark Harlan for remaining patient. I know a lot of you were like, they need to do something now. They read the room correctly. They made the right play. They didn't get left behind, as we did not think they would. And now Utah's in an exciting position going forward to continue to build and bolster their brand in the Big 12. That is going to do it for this week of Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you next week talking way more about Utah's move to the Big 12. Also talk about week 2 of fall camp. We barely got to talk any fall camp. And still, Utah got a commitment from a 4-star offensive lineman this past week, and I was barely able to talk about it because of all this crazy news. All that and more is going to be coming up on next week's Locked On Utes. We greatly appreciate all of you who listened and supported us all week long. Utah is officially a member of the Big 12, and we're going to be breaking it all down in so much more detail on Locked On Utes next week. We'll see you then. Have a fantastic weekend.